And what happens immediately after that is I have to take this big thing off the screen that says the recording meeting is in progress, so I can see all my lovely face and James. Okay. Oh, and we have Craig. Good. So we begin a new unit today. It's in the same series of Coming Great Global Spiritual Awakening. But we began, I think, logically with Weight in the Balance. Some of the sort of bad news seems like bad news about the church. And what I'm, trying to help us to see, it's not actually bad news. And so we spent some time with what is the state of the church today? What is the state of attendance? And why might that be? So this is the second unit. It'll take 2 or 3 weeks. And the theme on it is joy, simply. And I think you'll see the connection pretty quickly. A coming great spiritual awakening is not going to happen where there is no joy. If it's all doom and gloom, well, you can get some kind of an awakening out of that, but it's not usually a healthy one. And so I thought at the very beginning of this set of studies to put joy first as the quality to kind of look at. And I begin with just these opening up questions, which is, in the course of your day, do you come across more good news or bad news? In the course of your day, do you come across more good news or bad news? And then why? So as opposed to yes or no, good, I come across good news. What does that mean? Okay, I come across bad news. What does that mean? Of course, you come across a little bit of both. You come across more of one or the other. John?
I think it depends on how closely you're paying attention. If you really are paying attention to what's going on around you, in my experience, you're flooded with wonderful things.
Good news or bad news, and why? Yeah, he?
No, I was going to say this. I think it's all news. What's going to whether it's good news or bad news, it's your expectation.
Go with that.
It's your expectation in the sense that I've seen people turn what would have been good news into a crisis because it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
People take a simple problem, turn it still into a
Catastrophe.
Catastrophe, because the expectation is so high, and then what's really common in all these things, when you see yourself as the center of the world, everything revolves around you.
Yeah.
So, but for me, I think I've seen news every time. I think it's bad news, and there is something worse that it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
So whatever bad news you see, it could have been a lot worse. So,
And like you said, sometimes it's actually not bad news,
yeah.
but it isn't what you wanted. And so that turns into a catastrophe too. Aaron, oh, I'm sorry. Can I go in the order I actually saw the hands? Go ahead.
Oh, I would have to say that I recognize the fact that it's news usually is bad. Because
Yes,
that's what makes news.
exactly.
Which in itself, intellectually, I understand, well, actually, that's good because it means that,
Yeah,
that mostly it's good, but then some bad, but I do recognize that, that everybody has a reason, everything I see has a reason for being there, and often it's to get, eyeballs on it or whatever, so it's bad news. But I have signed up for a lot of things that are about good news, and it is good news out there, and it just sometimes gets covered up, but there's a lot of good news. There's a lot of good science news, good personal news, good health news, good a lot of good stuff out there. But sometimes it gets drowned out by what are admittedly huge problems
Yeah,
that we pray about all the time. You know, there are some really bad problems. Could be worse sometimes, but they're, you know, they're both out there, but the good kind of doesn't get as much press.
Yeah.
Let me just put it.
that, Aaron, I'll get to you in just a second, but I want you to catch that comment that Kathy made about news itself. If it's news, now we're actually talking about media. But even the way we talk to one another, what do we bring up in a conversation? And the news will tend to be, from time to time, it will tend to be bad because that's news. Think through that's what she said. It's news. So it tends to be bad. And let's see, there we go. So I don't get, oh, there we go. Great.
Bad news.
No, can't take that. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Technology makes our lives easier. Just keep repeating that.
Yes, bad news. This is almost bad news. But we can't live without it. So yeah, the notion that news itself is going to tend to be bad, but think about it, because that is news. Good doesn't get a lot of coverage because that's actually the normal. You follow what I'm saying? I mean, life rolls on, we have our problems, but we, had an encounter with a neighbor that was wonderful today. We have wonderful neighbors. We come to church, we come to a work party, we just come to church on a Sunday morning. You run into great people, you can have great shopping experiences, life rolls on, you find good things to do with your day. But none of that's going to make news. There's no news in any of that. So, but the other tip I would say with regard to good news and bad news. Well, first, Aaron.
Well, you're kind of running down the same path I was heading on. It is just, it's two things. It's one is where you get your news.
Yeah.
And the other one is what you do with that information. When we talked about, whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty, the glass half empty person hears that, a kid fell down the well and he's wondering, how long he's going to survive.
Yeah.
The optimist is hoping that they can rescue him before he gets too badly injured.
Yeah.
But I
John.
want to just pull the lens back a little bit. Teresa joined us this morning. Frank's in better shape than ever. Sean Marie was baptized yesterday. Kathy and her mom made it back from Texas, and I assume good shape. I mean, we and you said this a moment ago. Let's pay attention to what's really happening around us. Let that color our day, and then you'll find out there's no limit to the news you can identify.
Yeah,
today. The good news.
Yeah. I'm going to pick up on, depends on where you get your news. I'm going to change that a little bit to how you get your news, and would say media news, watching news will be a whole lot worse than reading news. If you're just talking about everything from Fox to CNN to NBC to MSNBC, looking at the whole spectrum across the range, when you hear it, it's going to be experienced as worse, more dramatic, and more sensational than if you actually read any of their websites. And a lot of it is because in media TV or whatever, the tone, the tone is meant to sensationalize. The tone is meant to work you up. The tone is meant to get your blood pressure, get your blood boiling if they can, because they want viewers. That's the game from the left to the right. It doesn't matter. They're all in that. That's all what they're trying to do. And they do it with tone, and they do it with editing. They do it with everything. You take a whole lot of that away from the media if you just read the websites. Or even print news takes that sensationalizing edge off of things. Jane?
A
Yes.
loud amen to all of that. And just a small additional comment. Radio is even more dangerous than TV and internet news. In terms of that, the stuff that you're describing, the intonation, and it's both sides of the spectrum. It's not
Yes.
just, the liberals or the conservatives. It's everybody out there. And that's my opinion. Some of you may strongly disagree with that, but all that intonation stuff is just that much more impactful over the radio.
Yeah. Take if you can, take the tone away from them. Find the facts. You'll find facts almost everywhere, but sometimes it's pretty hard to find them under the tone of what's being said. Okay, a secondary question. Yeah, sure.
I struggle with this a lot, so I have a lot to say. But one of the things is that in the age we live in right now, we feel literally the weight of the world on each one of us, because anything can happen in the world, earthquakes, tsunamis, whatever, wars, everything, and we know about it instantly.
Yes.
So, and I don't feel right saying I'm not gonna care about XYZ, that happened over here because it's too far away or something like that. I don't feel right about that. But at the same time, I realize that I'm probably not designed to feel the weight of the world on me all the time. If we just looked at the community in which we lived in, we would think, oh, this is pretty good. But I'm supposed to care about the mass shooters in Uvalde or something like that. I do have,
Yeah.
so this is my balance, but I do recognize that we suddenly know everything instantly.
Yes, and that's a change from even 30 years ago.
Right. Okay, that's my-
I mean, well, I'm going to expand on it a bit because that's actually a very important point. I mean, even 30 years ago, all you would, and this is still kind of true, but all you would get would be the US news, essentially, if you looked at the major networks. Now you do get the whole world, and that, not as much as you should actually. But what that means is every problem everywhere, Bangladesh, Kashmir, whatever, all is like it happened outside your front door. And, those places are a long, long ways away. Now, again, as Kathy says, that doesn't, here's what I have thought about that, which is it's really hard to remember the scale of things. The scale of things, by which I mean, I don't understand the hysteria over Second Amendment rights. I don't see anyone trying to take away fundamental Second Amendment rights, but act like we're a police state that wants to do that. I mean, that's part of media hysteria. Having said that, I also think, you have a mass shooting somewhere, and suddenly we're thinking it could happen tomorrow. Oh, on the front steps of the Stanford Church of Christ. Are you nuts? I mean, it actually could, but you've completely lost the scale. I mean, really, what are the odds? So because look at it. I mean, there's 350 million people in our country. Something impacts 30. Figure out the statistic on that. Figure out the multiple shootings in the country. And it's kind of crazy as high as it is, but it sometimes gets like 300 or 400 a year. Okay, that's still against 350 million people is not, it's something to pay attention to, but it's not something to lose sleep about at night. I mean, well, that's essentially it. Keep perspective, keep the scale. Because something happens in Uvalde doesn't mean the next place they're looking to do, they, whoever they may be, are looking for is a courtroom in Stamford, Connecticut. Well, yeah, it could happen there. Think through the odds. They're really, really small, you know, and I don't mean we have John back there. John's working on security stuff for us. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to knock that. I mean, but just in terms of your own peace of mind and tranquility, keep track of the odds, keep track of the scale. I mean, when news happens to a small community somewhere in the country, there are hundreds of thousands of small communities in our country. It isn't like, you know, Stamford, New York City, and Uvalde. You know, there's a whole bunch of other communities that had peaceful days yesterday. The vast majority of them, they were safe and they were secure, and compared to almost any other time in life, you know, safe and secure. I mean, the historian in me would say, okay, well, let's go back and live in the 19th century or the 18th century. I don't like some of the things I see, and I don't understand hysteria. I don't even think it's clear interpretation of the Constitution. Having said that, I don't lose sleep on it. You know, follow, you know, where I am, and the larger point for me is just keep the scale, keep the perspective on those kind of things. Okay, the other question, and we'll spend this basically noted in passing. Our good church, well, no, take a shot at it. Are churches usually associated with good news or bad news? And why do you answer as you do? Are churches usually associated with good news or bad news? And why do you answer as you do?
I say that. I say bad news in the sense that most teaching, most church teaching is you're in a constant state of prevention to go to hell. And that the reminder is, hey, God is out to get you.
Yeah.
Because of that state of mind.
Yeah.
You, even in like, I've seen more people praying about the power of the devil than praying about the goodness of Jesus.
Yeah.
A lot of time in church.
Absolutely. Praying more about the power of the devil and the power of the spirit. You know, I do believe there's a spiritual realm out there, but constant testimony of scripture is the one who is in you is more powerful than the one who's in the world. And I believe that. David.
So there's a into the close tribute to Dalai Lama, which I think could be analogous to this conversation, which is pain is inevitable, but suffering is an option. And so it makes me think about how we view the world around us. There are facts that happen, you know, bad things happen. But the reality is if we focus on the world that we think happens, the room we're in, the bed we wake up in, the family, there's a lot of good things out there. You know, just the fact that we're able to climb out of bed, that's good news. So we often overlook it because we're so fast and we're so fixated on what's happening in the East or Midwest, for that matter, and we go down a rabbit hole. So it's a choice between how we view things and how we embrace the blessings that we have or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I mean, I think the answer to that question is going to depend a little bit on your experience of the church. And I think a lot of people could probably say the churches that they go to have found grace and gospel. And you're at those churches, you're hearing way more good news. But historically, Guy raises or calls our attention to the big picture. So I'd go on to say then that our series on the coming great global spiritual awakening arises out of recognition, in part, that many people no longer go to church. There are many reasons for that. But one is they come to many churches and hear only bad news. And it's exactly what Guy said. They hear of a God outraged by their sins, and they hear views of the cross that accentuate the anger of God and not God's love. Now, the importance of the cross is never in question, but whether it's a reflection more of God's anger or God's love is a matter of emphasis. And historically, the focus has been on appeasing the anger of a wrathful God. And then they hear a story that ends horrifically with hundreds of millions of people suffering excruciating pain forever and ever and ever in the fires of hell. And so much the worse if they've ever had an abortion, or if their sexual orientation doesn't measure up or doesn't line up with the powers that be. You know, very precise cases that come up over and over again. You'd think in the news, these were the only two doctrines Jesus talked about. Matter of fact, he didn't talk about either one of them, but you would think that's what he had done. And, you know, and both, you know, especially to me, abortion is always tragic. Sometimes it's the only option a woman had. And so you have to look at the tragedy and don't think it was flip. She didn't think it was flip. I mean, I sometimes hear people acting like that, you know, just irresponsible, you know. Really, do you understand the suffering that goes into that kind of decision? I also understand in a lot of cases the suffering that happens after that decision. All of that is part of a mature Christian response to it. But if you've had one of these big sins that have been politicized into super big sins, and sexual orientation isn't a sin of any kind, it's sexual behavior can be. But if that's been your experience, and especially if someone is having to suffer through it by themselves, silently and privately because it's scandalous and shameful to them, they come to church and they leave battered, you know. And so what did they do? Well, I'm not going to go somewhere that batters me over and over again, you know. And that's what, you know, that's why we try here to not be that church. Okay, so the question then would be, what would churches, what would churches these days need to do to communicate the good news of great joy that will be for all the people? Now that's a phrase, it's where the title comes from, but that's a phrase that we'll be coming back to. It's, anyone recognize where the phrase comes from? I have the text here, but what's the text refer to? Anyone remember? It's seasonal.
Is it the Magnificat?
Yeah,
Oh, what? Jane?
the Magnificat.
The Magnificat, the Advent, the coming of Jesus.
It's
the
close
first
to
time.
me. Yeah, it's the angelic proclamation. The night that Jesus is born, you hear the angels in the sky, and then one angel proclaims the good news of great joy that is for all the people. And that has become to me sort of a lodestar, a way to tell whether I'm on track or not on track. Is what I'm proclaiming good news of great joy? Is it? Or kind of dark? Gets a little scary in this world. Or am I proclaiming good news of great joy? And then for all the people. We've always proclaimed good news of great joy for a really small group of people just like us. Because we aren't going to hell. You know, the other people are. You know, so you don't get a whole lot of credit for proclaiming good news of great joy only for the people who are exactly like you and think exactly like you. And that isn't what the angel's talking about either. The angel is saying good news of great joy for all the people. And so when I'm taking a position on something, and particularly whether if I'm going to really go to the mat on it, if this is something to really get fired up about, I'm going to be asking whether the position I hold is a position that I could only hold, let's say, well, in my church. I can only say that in my church. Well, if I can only say that in my church and sound like a reasonable human being, then I'm in the wrong church. I mean, it's got to be something that somebody outside your group could look at and say, that kind of makes sense. You know, I follow you on that. You know, that's a logical thing to say. It might not be a compelling thing. They may not have to agree with you, but you at least have to be able to say it and not have them just smirk. You know what I mean? Oh wow, religious people these days, you know. Or for instance, is it for all the people? Does this view of things only make sense in America? You know, now, you know, the odds are if it makes sense generally in America, it's apt to be fairly sensible. There's a lot of people here. Okay, a lot of different viewpoints. It generally makes sense in America. But what I'm saying is there are thoughts and doctrines I've held over the years that someone in China would never be able to get their head around. Never. I mean, I could talk to them all day long. They're just not wired to see the world from that perspective. And I have to be careful there. I always believe the central doctrines I hold, there is a way to present it as good news of great joy to all the people, but it may take a little work instead of just saying it the way I've always said it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's that point is still true, but maybe the internal debates I've had on it aren't going to carry the day when I get outside of my own immediate culture. And that's probably a tip-off that I may need to broaden my thinking, nuance my thinking, because to me, the fundamental principle will be what the angel said that day. And that's what we're talking about in this unit, the good news of great joy for all the people. That is what people are looking for, is good news. And I qualify, you know, what good news is, a sense of forgiveness. You know, more people need that than we think about. You know, you sometimes think you need it. You know, why are you feeling so down? You don't feel forgiven. You know, chances are wrongly. You know, like God said, I wiped that off years ago. I don't know why you're still holding it. You know, but that's the good news comes in when you do feel forgiven, when you found meaning, purpose, and direction in life, when you have a mission in life, when you have a way to lighten up. You know, I've had to work my whole life on that, a way to lighten up, you know, a way to get unstuck from all the ways life can trap us. You know, I love what my grandson Ezra did when he was, you know, his first language. You know, little ones, you know, it's mama, dada, you know, maybe papa, maybe Grammy, maybe, I don't know, drink, I don't know what. One of his first words after those immediate few was stuck. I'd never heard that from a 16-month-old, let's say. And he stuck, and he'd look at me. And I suppose a lot of the time he was talking about something physical. But I immediately saw the existential points of it. The rest of your life, that is a problem. You get stuck on something, you know, and the good news is when you get unstuck from all the ways life can trap us, what people are looking for is what Jesus came and what he comes offering, and that is joy. And I'm in that second paragraph there. I want you to see how I'm describing joy, that deep smile in the soul that tells us all is well and all shall be well, whatever we face. That deep smile in the soul that tells us all is well and all shall be well, whatever we face. Now, we could have started this unit by coming up with a clear definition of joy. I don't know if I did that or not. But I think the mind goes pretty quickly to what is the connection between joy and happiness? And I would say a whole lot of people experience very little joy because they live their whole life to be happy. Does that make sense? See what I'm driving at there? That they just want, hey, we're having a good time. I've got what I want. I was able to get what I want. This went well, that went well. You know, I want to be happy. And happiness to me, it turns out to be one of those many things in life that when you aim directly at it, it's almost impossible to get. There's a whole lot of things like that. I mean, self-importance, self-significance. I aim a whole lot at self-significance. I likely will never get it. You know, but and the same thing here with happiness. Happiness, you know, I looked up some definitions on that, but I'll tell you, in these kind of areas, I don't trust definitions. When you start a discussion like this and say, well, first we need to define. I go, oh. Because usually what we then do, we're trying to constrict the conversation in some way, and it turns fairly artificial. It's kind of right, but you know so on happiness. But what I would say, kind of generally, happiness tends to have a lot of material side to it. Stuff. It's going to depend on stuff. The joy is going to depend almost not at all on stuff. And that, or as I say here, that deep smile in the soul that tells us all is well and all shall be well, whatever we face. Okay, the text we're going to next, and we have just enough time to read it. We'll start 2 weeks from now. Search committee will be down here next Sunday. The Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 13. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Great Thanksgiving theme. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. A couple of aside verses, I think. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Tells me there's something more to this story than we first think. But indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Okay. Comment bursting out, Scott.
I think this kind of brings up a good news. It's not what we generally think it is in simplistic terms, because good news is not the lack of your ability to think about bad things.
Right. It is your ability.
It enhances your ability. And when you know, when Paul can say. It's good news when I'm hungry or when I don't have a place to live. It sounds really not quite right, but I think it's all good news when we come from a place of resilience where we're tightly connected to a community who loves us unconditionally. And that actually gives us the ability to look head on to some things that make us really anxious and make us sometimes even sad. But that's good news. isn't
Yeah.
it?
Joy enhances your ability to handle tough stuff. And you don't have to lose the joy in the middle of it. That's what joy is.
And I think ultimately that's why people leave churches, not because there's too much bad to talk about. It's that we don't give people a safe place to actually look at the most difficult parts of their lives.
Okay, stop recording and Aaron will lead us in prayer.